Here the unit I'm doing this repair on. The model number is a TUX1C100A9481AB. Serial number is 83255, B as in boy, N7G. And it's a Train is the manufacturer. Here I'm going to show you how to replace a control board. I'm currently working on a Train gas furnace. This here is the new ignition control board. You can see it's slightly different than the layout of this old one. One of the big changes on this is Train had an 80 volt igniter before, and now on the new boards they're converting everything to 120 volt igniters. So on this particular system I will be putting the new board in, and actually it comes with a new igniter with it that's a 120 volt igniter. I think they were just having lots of issues with these 80 volt igniters, so they've kind of switched back to the 120 volt igniters. So I always recommend to start off by taking a picture. That way you can go back to it if a wire came loose or something like that when you weren't paying attention. Another thing, if you're really, worried that you're going to get something wrong, you could always put pieces of tape or mark it with Sharpie or any of those kind of tricks to make sure you're getting the wires back to where they need to be. Another trick that I usually try to do is I always try to match wire for wire. I basically just pull one right off of the old board, put it onto the new board, one wire at a time. That way you really have less likely to make any mistakes. Big thing too on your new board is to make sure all your wires are nice and tight. If you need to adjust or redo terminals from your wires, now it's the time to do it for sure. Also, I think it goes without saying, just make sure you have killed the power to the system. Check with your voltmeter on the incoming power to make sure you have no voltage before you get started. Another safety you have obviously is this door switch, so when you pull the panel off it kills power, but you shouldn't be relying on that safety alone when you're doing the board. So definitely find the power. Majority of the time there's a on-off power switch close to the unit that you can turn it off there. If not there, go back to the breaker panel box. I usually start by removing these Molex plugs just to get more area to work with. They're obviously very easy to hook back up and not get misplaced or plug in the wrong spot. So I just kind of unplug those right at the get-go, just get them out of the way. Another thing you can see is on these boards you can kind of see like cool, park, heat. They're really labeled really well on here, so you can really just match everything back on here on the same verbiage they're using on the old board. Occasionally they change the verbiage, but not very often. And worst case scenario, you always have your wiring schematic you can fall back on. That's usually printed on the back side of the main front panel door. So as far as actually removing the board from the unit, there's 4 little tabs. Typically they're in each corner, all 4 corners of the board. You just need to remove them either by pinching them closed with like needle nose pliers, or sometimes you can just cut them with dikes. Is sometimes a quicker, easier way. The new board typically has new ones with it that will pop right in, all of the same holes. So a lot of times I'll just cut them off, get rid of them, because I know I have new ones with my new board. So if you ever mess up or mislabel or forgot to take the picture of your wiring, for wiring in your thermostat right here, I'm just going to go over your typical generic colors that almost everyone in the field uses. But Y is typically your yellow, W is typically your white, R is typically your red, G is typically green, and your common is typically blue, and occasionally people use black, but typically it's always blue. That's just your wiring to hook up your thermostat on a control board. So after I get everything installed, I will typically test it in a call for heat. If everything looks good there, I'll go into cool, and then I'll go to fan. I'll do all of this from the actual thermostat typically, just to make sure everything is looking good before I leave a site. Also, this new board came with some paperwork. It'll have a new diagnostic fault code readout for everything. So I always leave this on site with the equipment just so that we have it for future diagnostic. That is how you install a new control board on a train unit.